Last week, I titled the talk, The New Cigarette. This week, I want it to be, the title of the talk is going to be Taking Back Control. And so, that's what I'm wanting to offer today is some answers to some of the problems around social media we talked about last week. So today we're going to get practical, what we can do about it. I really appreciated the feedback I got from a lot of you last week. So far, it doesn't sound like anybody was ready to throw any stones at me. So I'm hoping that today we're going to be able to walk out of here the same way. And so I just want to emphasize my heart for this talk is not to come across as anything judgmental. I don't want anyone to feel like, that I'm trying to judge you in any way. I'm just wanting to, this is mostly coming from out of my own conversations with some of you and from my own experience, a desire for some of us just feeling like we're not as in control of these technologies as we'd like to be. And so I'm trying to offer some perspectives and some help in us in how we can deal with this. And so to start this talk, we're going to get a little bit of a review, but before that, let's go ahead and pray. Father, I thank you for a wonderful Sunday to gather. Thank you for all my brothers and sisters here. God, I pray that you will just give me wisdom and peace to share this topic, just to share some practical insights on how we as Christians can navigate this technology, this powerful technology that we carry in our pockets today. I pray that we can be like Paul and be able to walk circumspectly on this issue and to use wisdom. And I just pray you'll give me the words to speak. We pray this in Jesus' name, amen. All right, so a little bit about my background again. So the only reason this guy is up here right here today, I guess, is I have a interesting perspective, just the fact that I've been involved in the tech industry. So I went to college and in Sattler College in Boston, got a bachelor's degree in computer science, and now I am working as a software engineer. So this talk is coming from someone who's in the industry, who understands and has worked with a lot of the same technologies that a lot of these social media companies use. And so, just to share that perspective. And so, I want us to have, last week I sort of gave this biblical frame around the talk of, we're going to have this position from, this passage from Paul, where he tells us to see then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time because the days are evil. And so I want to continue that as a frame around this talk. Just as we go through the talk, to remember we're trying to walk circumspectly, and circumspectly here meaning, we want to be careful, we want to be wise in how we use this technology. I want to bring in the additional passage from Paul, and that's this passage from 1 Corinthians 6:12. And I think this is a key theme, the key heart from where I want to approach this talk, and it's this: all things are lawful for me, but all things are not helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. And so that is, I think, a key important point for us today. And so Paul here is talking to the Gentiles. They were no longer under the Mosaic law, and it kind of felt like they could do anything. But Paul's reminding them that the way we live and how we use our bodies and the way we interact in the world is important, and especially we don't want to come under the power of any of these things and be subject to them. So I want to draw then a connection to that directly with social media and our smartphones. So I'm just going to leave this question right here. Does your smartphone have power over you? Are you in control, or is the smartphone in control? And so we want to be able to be like Paul and say, nothing has any power over me, obviously except for God. And so for myself, there's been many periods of my life, and it's still a battle, where I don't feel like I can answer this question with a yes. So I'm just going to recap then a little bit of what we talked about last week. So I shared a few of the data points Basically, the overall summary is that society is beginning to recognize some of the problems of social media, especially in younger users. And so basically, there's a consensus coming out that it's not as innocent as we thought it was. It's an interesting tool, it's a fun tool, it's useful, but it also has some harmful side effects. Guys like Jonathan Haidt with the Anxious Generation has drawn some interesting connections with the data and the rise in smartphone use. We've got the US Surgeon General declaring that we should have warning labels like we do on cigarettes on social media. And we also then looked at, so the entire country of Australia has now banned social media for youth 16 and under. And just last week a headline came out, so they've now said that they have closed 4.7 million social media accounts based on this ban. So basically countries are saying, we need to do something about this, and we're not going to let, especially as far as protecting our young people, we can't just let this, this technology has some harmful problems. And so then we also then looked at, so when I talk about social media, just to make sure we're on the same page, these are some of the technologies I'm talking about. We're talking about YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, the Reddits, the Snapchats, all that kind of stuff. And so we then looked at, society's starting to do something about this. There's some data coming out that there are some potential harmful side effects of this technology. So what sort of leads to that? And we looked at this concept of the attention economy, and it's sort of the business model behind a lot of these social media companies. Basically incentivizes them to lead us to try to use our phones as much as possible. So basically, these apps are free, but essentially we are paying for them with our attention, with your time. They use the data you input into the app and the way you use it, they can use that to sell to advertisers. And there's this business model where the more time you spend on the app, the more ads they can show you, which means the more ads they can sell to advertisers. So there's this whole then incentive to get you to use it more. And so we then talked about how they get you to use it more. And it's this idea then where they took cues from slot machines, Las Vegas, casinos, and took some of the playbooks and used some of those aspects to engineer certain parts of the apps to make them more fun to use, basically to keep us using them, keep us coming back. And so some of these ideas we talked about were things like algorithmic feeds, where that's where you have your Facebook, your Instagram feed, and it's perfectly curated to your interests. And it's designed so that all the content in there is usually it's very interesting to you. So they can figure out ways to keep you coming back. We also then, another aspect of this is this idea of infinite scrolling. So they've removed the natural stopping points in these apps. You can scroll for hours, right? There's no end in sight. Another big piece of this that keeps us sticky with these apps is this idea of variable rewards, where these are the things like the notifications and stuff like that. They will pop up when they think you might be getting a little disinterested. So all these together work to become a very powerful force, and it feels like sometimes that the odds are stacked against us, where there's billions of dollars invested in these companies. They figured out ways to keep us hooked. So what can we do about it? And at least we're using this imagery from casinos, and in the at least from what I hear, the gambling world, there's this in the casino world, there's this idea that the house always wins, and it's generally true, where you go into a casino, you hit a few slot machines, most likely you're going to come out losing money. And so what I've mentioned today sounds all maybe a little gloomy and doomy, but I want to offer us hope. I want to give us some solutions now to take back control, where we can live engage with these technologies, but to where we are in control of them and not the companies using and exploiting us. So I want to remind us of this biblical frame especially this passage from Paul in 1 Corinthians 6, that I will not be brought under the power of any of these things. So here's a little bit of our outline for today. The concept that we're going to be going with is this idea of digital minimalism. It's from a book that I read and found very helpful in learning to better use these technologies. With that, there's this concept of a digital declutter. And then I'm going to give some example scenarios down to the brass tacks of what this kind of looks like. And finally, I'll just share a little bit of, from my own life, how I sort of practice this idea of digital minimalism. All right, so before we get into that, I think it would be helpful if we actually start taking some time to reflect on where we are at. And with this being a technology talk, thought we could have a little fun with technology, if I can find my mouse. All right, let me actually do this. Okay. So, I will... All right, so I'm gonna... Oops. All right. Let me just share this link then. I'm going to post it on the chat, the Crosspoint Church chat, and then I'll also throw it up on the screen. So if you can go to that link, if you have your phone, go ahead and go to that. If you don't have your phone, you get bonus points. You get a lucky star afterwards. So go ahead and go to this link, and when you're in there, just wait there. It should pop you right in. If not, you can enter this code, ZFHZUT. And we're going to just do a few fun little questions. And once again, all these answers are completely anonymous, so I can't see any of them, so don't worry about any of that. All right. So I don't know, you can see that. All right, let me, is there a way to make this full screen? Nope. Okay. I don't know if can you read that? So the question I want us to ask, this is going to start popping, the answers will start popping up on the screen. The question I want to ask you is, what was your most used app from last week? And so there's, in both Android and iPhone, they have this feature. I think it's screen time on iPhone and digital well-being on Android. So go into your settings, if you can figure this out. If not, just based on what you think. But if you can, go into your settings and take a look at your usage from last week. It might surprise you what was in there. And if you can, then just put on one or two of your most used apps in there. Okay, are you able to get them in? It's not going through? Oh, the code. Okay, so it's still asking for a code. Okay, so the code is ZFHUT. So I'll go back to this screen then. Sorry about this, guys. There you go. Is that, are you in now? Vote in progress? Okay, good. All right, that's what we want. It will, like if I go to, how about now? We'll just give it 1 second. I'll give you a couple more seconds. Oh, That's not good. We might be crashing the Wi-Fi. Okay. Sorry about this, guys. Yeah, so mine just crashed, so I'm on the Wi-Fi, so. Maybe we'll have to skip this one. I guess if you want to, everyone can try to turn off your Wi-Fi and just use your cellular data, but I don't know if we can recover from this or not. Give it a couple more seconds. All right, so this is what can happen with technology, right? All right, so we're gonna abandon this, unfortunately. So that would have been fun, but basically, I was gonna ask you. So, look at your most used app, and just take a look. I mean, if anybody feels like volunteering, anybody have one that they would like to volunteer? WhatsApp. That's a pretty common one. WhatsApp. Yep. Steve. Chrome. There you go. That's usually what it is for me too. Instagram, all right, there you go. Anybody else? Safari, another common one. Yeah, and so the next question I was going to ask you then is, if you can take a look then at your average screen time from last week, how many hours did you spend on your phone last week? I don't know if we have any brave volunteers for that one. So, you can take a look there. 5 hours, 30 minutes. Using it for business, right? Yeah. All right, we're in the 5-hour range. Okay. Okay. So this is just, if you can't find it, take some time to go and look at it and look at your number, and look at the apps that you're using. If it's, Google Maps and your phone, those are technologies that are important. But if it's the other more addictive apps like, say, Instagram, Facebook, if those are the apps at the top of the feed, you might want to ask yourself some questions if you're okay with that amount of time being spent. So, I wish we could have done that fun little technology thing, but that's how it goes sometimes. And so let's dive in then with how we can think about using this technology in a healthy way. So most of what I'm going to share today is from this book by this author, Cal Newport. It's called Digital Minimalism. Sounds super, deep or whatever. It's really not that complicated. So basically, it's written from this guy named Cal Newport. He was an MIT computer scientist and a digital ethicist. And so I've found this book to be very helpful in how I think about how I use technology today. And so here's the definition of what digital minimalism is. So this is what he calls it: a philosophy of technology use in which you focus your online time on a small number of carefully selected and optimized activities that strongly support things you value and then happily miss out on everything else. So, in other words, basically, we need to be very selective actually in what we choose, what apps we choose. So, a lot of us, we're just kind of conditioned the way our phones kind of led us into this, where if an app is at the top of the App Store, you're going to download it, check it out, see what it is. And so we're almost taught then too that, like, if you're not staying on top of things, if you're not getting the latest technology, you're going to get left behind, you're going to be disconnected, you're not going to have friends, you're not going to be popular. And so we've bought into this idea that if it's new, if it's out there, we've got to try it, we got to use it. And so he's trying to push back on that a little bit and say, actually, let's have a filter at least where if a technology, like before we adopt a new technology, we need to make sure that it fits into our values. And so that is kind of one of the key parts here is figuring out what do you value, what is really important. And I feel like from our perspective, so this is also, I just mentioned, this is a secular scientist approaching this, so trying to bring in, from us as, Anabaptist Christians, from our Anabaptist perspective. And so I think a great way to start for us is, looking at the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus tells us where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And so when we think about our social media use, I think this is a good lens. Look at, put it through the lens of the Sermon on the Mount, through what Jesus tells us is important, and look at what's really important in your life. And so it's just some ideas I have on here. I encourage you to spend some time, thinking through yourself, but, things that are valuable to us, like our relationship with God, building the kingdom of God, discipling others, our families, spending physical time with friends, embracing self-discipline, learning new things. And so, think about then your apps, like the apps you use on your phone, do they fit in with these core values? And interesting enough, I thought I would just mention this in the book. So the book does have a whole section on the Amish as almost as an example of a proof of concept of this idea of digital minimalism. And I know that I've heard the stories of, the secret smartphones and all that, but I just want to just bring this point out that there's something in, a lot of us here have this Amish culture, and there's something there in your Amish culture that this sort of idea is built in where, you only are engaging with technologies that are beneficial to the community. And so I just encourage us to sort of not throw the baby out with the bathwater here and keep to this principle. So now getting down, so a couple more things he mentions in the book, I'll just bring these out, is another idea in digital minimalism is to embrace solitude and boredom. So he gives some ideas for things like, going for a walk without a podcast. These are not, things I'm not saying you have to do these things, but just try these things sometimes. Driving without music, not checking your texts in the grocery store line, these sort of things. Another concept he gives is the phone foyer method, where when you're home, keep your phone in a place, in a central place, kind of like this is sort of, back to the 90s, where the phone was on the wall in a certain place in the house, and if you needed to call, you had to go stand there at the phone and talk to someone, but now we're carrying it in our pocket everywhere we go, and as with these, the way they have designed it to pull us, it's hard to not pull that out and just check it when we're thinking about it. So if you keep it though in a central place, go check it every once in a while, see if you have any phone calls, any messages. It's a kind of helpful way to sort of get more control. All right, so just a recap then, what digital minimalism is. And so in a short version, I would say it's choosing to only use technologies that directly support your values and intentionally choosing sometimes to not engage with certain technologies. So you can ask this question, does this tool actively support the life I want to build, or does it detract from it? It's a good question you can ask when you're trying to figure out if you want to use a certain technology. So one of the brass tacks thing that he gives is, so we've added all these apps in our lives without any question, any hesitation. We've just downloaded them, signed up. We've kind of cluttered our phones with a lot of technology maybe that doesn't fit in with our values. And so the solution that he offers is this idea of a digital declutter. And now notice it's not a digital detox. You might have heard this idea of, I'm going on a digital detox. And the reason why is because the digital detoxes, they don't work. And you've probably tried it. Maybe you've I'm sick of how much time I'm spending on whatever app you're using. And so you decide to delete it and for a week. But then nothing in the way you've defined that relationship with that app has changed. The next week you download it again and you're back to doom scrolling. So what he suggests then is and he also is mentioning that, you might also then, you'll read a blog or even you'll see it on social media, hacks to sort of stop your social media scrolling. So things like, turning off notifications, making your screen black and white, different little things. All by them, good suggestions, but by themselves won't keep you, they're not powerful enough to overcome the pull that these companies have designed them. And so he recommends this idea, the digital declutter, is to basically take 30 days and to take a break and basically stop using all optional technology in your life. So it's a pretty big challenge, but the point here is to not engage in optional technology. So any technology that you need for running your business, communicating with your family. So I would, consider things like email. A lot of us, if you work in any kind of office job, you would probably love the idea of being able to take a 30-day break from email, but you probably can't. So things like that, you keep using them. But the more optional things, like maybe say YouTube or Facebook, Instagram, maybe streaming services, whatever, take a break from those for 30 days. And okay, so you take a break from those for 30 days. So there's a couple more details around the digital declutter. And so he gives it basically as a 3-step process. So you take your break from the optional technologies. And these 2 points are really important. During that time then, for all that freed up time you've now given yourself, you need to aggressively explore higher quality, real life activities that you find meaningful. So things you used to do before you had a phone, and if you didn't grow up with one. So things you used to do, that can be, I'll just, a few that come to mind are, reading books, spending more time in scripture, spending more time in prayer, hanging out with family, hiking, these sorts of things. And so aggressively, you have to be very intentional about replacing this time. And finally, this is the most important part, the third part. This is where this is what the difference is between a detox and a declutter. At the end of this break, you don't just go back to your old habits. You only then reintroduce absent technologies that directly serve your values. And he then offers a 3 questions or 3 principles that an app has to meet for it to be introduced back into your life. So this is the secret. This is why your detoxes didn't work, is you need to address these 3 points. So he calls it the minimalist technology screen. So basically, I've kind of summarized it a little bit. He does get a little computer sciencey sometimes, so try to make it easy to understand. So one, the technology you're trying to reintroduce, it's got to, 1, serve something you deeply value. And offering just some benefit is not enough. It has to directly offer immediate value. And number 2, that technology needs to be the best way, that is the best way to use technology to serve this value. So if it's not, replace it with something better. And then this technology needs to be used in your life within a certain set of boundaries. I'll give just an example. So I'll give an example from my life. So I used to really enjoy using X, Twitter. As a person in tech, it's kind of the place where programmers and technology gurus hang out and talk about tech. I felt like I needed it. I felt like that's my thing. I got to stay on top. So there was a value there. I want to stay on top of my industry. I want to know what's going on. However, when I started answering these questions, I was like, yes, it meets that value, but is that the best way, especially considering some of the side effects or the drawbacks of these technologies? So for me, I realized if I want to actually keep up with the industry, it'd be better to directly follow some of these industry leaders through, say, their blogs, or maybe they offer some sort of in-depth YouTube channel, or even just some of the latest books that are written about it. So in my own life, and also I found that I found it very difficult to set any kind of boundary on this app. So I would find myself, my son's trying to talk to me after school, and I'm like sitting there scrolling X, and do I really need to know about the latest AI update, And so for me, I've actually just decided that I'm just going to not use it. I do have some ways I can check on a couple Twitter profiles but I don't have the app anymore. I don't use it in that way, and I don't follow like that. So this is a really important point. This is what I think really can make the difference between a detox and a declutter. All right, so just to summarize this section, so we have this idea of a declutter. So it's where you take a 30-day break from optional technology. You then aggressively pursue non-digital activities. I mean, they can be digital, but, and he's definitely trying to encourage us to go engage in the real world, pick up a book, go spend time with your friends, go talk to your neighbor, that kind of thing. And then finally, only then, this is the most important part, only reintroduce then a value-aligned technology. And in this reintroduction summary, so how do you then reintroduce these technologies? It's got to directly support a value. That technology has to be the best way to support that value, and then it must be able to be controlled. All right, and so I think it'd be helpful then to now offer just a couple example scenarios of how this process might work. And once again, these scenarios, I'm not at all trying to pick on anybody. I just try to come up with a couple that you could probably relate to a little bit. So let's say this guy, the electrician. So he needs his smartphone for legitimate work. He's got to make phone calls, he's got to do emails, he's got to text his customers. But he keeps finding that when he sits down in his truck, he wants to go check a text, but all of a sudden that turned into a 30-minute TikTok reel session, and 30 minutes of work didn't get done. So he decides that he's going to go on a digital declutter. He deletes all optional technologies, so he deletes the social media and the video apps on his phone. During that period, he starts doing things like bringing a book to read over lunch break, or maybe just laying down to rest his back, over lunch break and not listen to anything, just sit there and relax, whatever. Or maybe he talks to his one of his coworkers and finds out that he also really enjoys grilling or something like that. So finally then he does this reintroduction process. And so he realizes his value with his smartphone is, it's a tool for the job site. I got to communicate with people. I need to look up information, for electrical work. But it's not an entertainment center for me. So that's what he's decided. So he decided that when he reintroduces technology, he's going to allow podcasts and YouTube, but they're only going to be for work-related content. He then made he looked at his values and decided that, for him, putting Instagram and TikTok back on his phone is not going to meet his values. So you can see here there's a mixture where he's very deliberate. Some technologies he's deciding to use, and some he's being okay with just not using them. So here's another one, the connected mom. So a lot of moms, they need to keep updated, school updates. They gotta have their phone ready for emergencies. You gotta know what's going on. Unfortunately, though, she finds herself doom scrolling Instagram in their afternoon nap time for her kids and starts comparing her life to other perfect moms on Instagram. So she decides to go on the digital declutter. She removes Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, whatever, over this declutter time. And she then is very intentional then during this period of aggressively pursuing, things she used to enjoy maybe when she didn't have a phone. So I'm just throwing out some examples here. She spends the afternoon flower gardening or maybe scrapbooking. So things like that, or spending some time in prayer, whatever it is. So finally then at the end of the 30-day period, when she's then trying to figure out what technology to bring back into her life, she goes through this process. And so she makes a value that she decides that she gets some kind of value from Instagram, and that's the best way to meet that. And so, but she then sets controls around it. So instead of putting it back on her phone, which she has with her all the time, she'll put it on a family tablet that's in a certain room that she only checks then. She makes a rule where she's only going to check that once a week, and she limits the time to an hour. So you can see here, we're not just saying that you should just totally delete it necessarily. I mean, for some people maybe, but she made a value assessment and decided that she's going to put some bounds around this tool, Instagram. One more example, or at least one more. Furniture salesman, so he's got to run his business on social media. But he keeps finding himself messaging potential customers at the dinner table at night. So, and also in the evening, he's scrolling, comparing his business to other businesses. So the declutter step, he removes Facebook, Instagram, and then he spends his evenings, spends his evenings sketching new furniture ideas, that sort of thing, instead of looking at other ideas from businesses, trying to be creative and get his, mind being creative on his own business ideas. In the reintroduction step, then, he decides that he's only going to use Facebook and Instagram on his computer, and he sets up a posting schedule. You can do this where he schedules out his business posts in the week, and then he decides that he's going to unfollow all accounts, and so he has no feed now, no algorithmic feed. He's just going to use it as sort of an inbound marketing tool where I'm only going to open myself up for people requesting information about my business or looking for selling something. So he set some very strict rules around it. For the sake of time, I won't go over the FOMO student, but that's another one we could talk about. So I'm just going to quick then bring this home. So practicing what I preach, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what I do. So for me, based on some of what Cal Newport recommends, I've made a decision for my life, on my values, that I am not going to keep any curated algorithmic feeds on my phone. So I can't handle the digital Doritos. I drew a connection to, Cal Newport has this analogy where these apps with these algorithmic feeds, so just, what I mean by that is like, your Facebook feed, your Instagram feed, your X feed, they're, curated in a way to make them very engaging, very hard to put down. I've found that if I have anything with a feed on it, I will be scrolling with it whether I want to or not. So I just basically made a decision there. Of course, I use social media messaging platforms and stuff like that. Things like WhatsApp, Telegram, whatever. But I'm also very aggressive at muting certain groups. So my family chat gets a lot of action, but most of the time those are not, very critical updates I need to know right now. So I mute it and I go and I'll check it, at certain times during the day. I also then allow myself to use YouTube in my browser. Now, so when I did the digital declutter a while ago, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to keep the YouTube app on my phone, but I am going to allow YouTube in the browser. For me, it's always like stuff like when you're trying to figure out how to reset your change oil light on your van. It's like this crazy dance you got to do. Turn the key, roll the window down, open the door, honk the horn, that kind of stuff. I can never remember the steps. So I always have to just watch YouTube for the 2012 Toyota Sienna reset light, whatever. So, but I kept finding myself, even in the browser, like a junkie, browsing the browser feed in YouTube. And so I figured out a way in my browser I use on my phone where I can actually completely block the feed, and I also block the shorts button. So that's another element there. So I basically said no shorts or anything, no YouTube shorts, you know what I mean. None of that on my phone. I also, I mentioned I deleted my Twitter and X account, and I made a value assessment too, where I'm just not going to engage at all in technologies like TikTok or Instagram. And so, like some of the examples I gave, I do use some of the social media services like Facebook or Reddit and general news sites. However, I use this app called Freedom, where I will set. So I'm a person, most of my job, I'm on my computer, so I still feel a lot of that pull to go check these sites. And so I have to use this app called Freedom that literally will, I'll sometimes set it up on a schedule where every morning from 6 a.m. to 12 till noon, those sites are completely blocked, where I can't go check them. And I focus on my work, focus on what I need to get done for the morning, and that really helps. I've also used tools like Social Focus is a browser extension where you can just completely eliminate these feeds on these apps. And so one last final example of how I've applied this. So I don't know if you're familiar, anybody familiar with the technology Substack? A couple people here. So I know Caleb, yeah, you have a Substack. So Substack is this is a email newsletter technology. And so they've now, I was, I had this value. I want to learn new things and read more. And so these newsletters are, more in-depth, right? More in-depth reading. So sounds like a really good idea. And so I was like, hey, I should go download the Substack app. And so I really enjoy learning new things about whatever. Actually, I found, so I mentioned the anxious generation. So Jonathan Haidt, I want to keep updated with what he's saying about the latest social media use. He's got a Substack. However, I downloaded the phone, and guess what? I found out it's got an algorithmic feed. And guess who started doom scrolling it? This guy. And so that was where, so I decided, that's my value. I am not going to allow an app with an algorithmic feed on my phone. So I deleted it, and I decided to engage with that technology Substack. I'm just going to stick with my email app and check the Substack newsletters in my email app. All right, so to bring this home in conclusion, Cal Newport gives this idea. He calls it the attention resistance. So that's what I'm inviting all of us today. Let's join the attention resistance to take back control of your attention and your autonomy. These apps are powerful, they're strong, they're also useful, we enjoy using them, but if you are not intentional with how you are engaging with them, they will be in control of your life. And it will be like this, like the Apostle Paul. All things are lawful for me, but all things are not helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. So that's my heart for you today. I hope I offered a few tips, or just a few helpful ways. And just to summarize, so what we talked about, I gave you the concept of digital minimalism, choosing to only use technologies that directly support your values and doing without anything that doesn't. Offer the suggestion of a digital declutter, taking a break from optional tech for 30 days. Some ideas too of embracing quiet and solitude, and to pursue healthy leisure activities. This is the most important part. When you then, after you do your declutter, reintroduce technology that only fits your values. And then you also need to be very specific with setting boundaries, limits, time limits, days of the week for when you use them. And finally, if there's nothing else you take from this app, I'd encourage you to try this. Avoid or delete apps with algorithmic feeds on your phone. At least use them, stick to them on some kind of other device that you basically don't keep that with you everywhere you go. It's the same idea, I don't carry a bag of Doritos in my pocket all day. If I did, I'd probably be eating Doritos all day. And another helpful tip then was, keep your phone in a separate space while you're at home. So thank you so much for listening, and if there are any questions, I'll open it up. Or if also there are any testimonies, maybe, these are just a few things from my experience, things I read. There's a lot of other great things, great tips. There's even some helpful devices I've heard of, like the brick device. I was going to mention that. There's a lot of different ways you can do with this. So this is just to start giving you some stuff to help you take back control. So thanks so much for listening. Any questions?